The little cafe inside the Grand Maple Hotel was full that rainy Thursday afternoon. Every table was occupied by people escaping the storm outside. Business travelers typed on laptops, elderly couples shared warm coffee, and families waited patiently for the rain to slow. The room buzzed with quiet conversations until the front door opened and a young woman stepped inside, balancing herself carefully on a pair of crutches. Water dripped from her blonde hair as she paused near the entrance, scanning the crowded room with nervous eyes. A sleek black prosthetic leg disappeared beneath her simple gray dress. For a moment, everyone looked at her, and then almost everyone looked away. She smiled politely, but there wasn't a single empty chair anywhere. Across the room, a single father sitting alone with his 6-year-old daughter noticed her hesitation. A few seconds later, she gathered her courage, walked toward his table, and softly asked, "Can I sit here?" What happened next didn't just change her life, it left an entire room wiping away tears. Before we begin this unforgettable story, if you believe kindness still has the power to change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. We would also love to know where you're watching from, so tell us in the comments below. Your support helps these true-to-heart stories reach more people around the world. Elias Mercer had never imagined that life would become so quiet. 5 years earlier he had been an energetic high school history teacher with a cheerful wife named Nora, a modest home, and dreams that stretched far beyond their small town. Everything changed on one freezing winter evening when a drunk driver crossed the center line. Elias survived with minor injuries, but Nora never made it home. Overnight, the man who once laughed easily became a father forced to learn how to raise a little girl while carrying grief that never truly disappeared. His daughter, Marin, had been only 1 year old when she lost her mother. She had no memories of Nora except for photographs hanging in their small apartment and the bedtime stories Elias told every Sunday night. Those stories weren't really for Marin. They were just as much for him, a way to keep Nora alive in the only place death could never reach, memory. Life as a single father wasn't glamorous. Elias woke before sunrise every morning, packed lunches, braided hair after watching dozens of online tutorials, hurried to school where he taught teenagers all day, then rushed to pick Marin up before daycare closed. Money was always tight. There were weeks when he quietly skipped dinner so his daughter could have fresh fruit instead of canned peaches. Yet despite every hardship, Marin grew into a joyful little girl with bright hazel eyes and a habit of smiling at strangers as if the world had never given her a reason not to. That Thursday afternoon wasn't supposed to be special. School had ended early because of severe weather warnings, and Elias promised Marin they would share hot chocolate before heading home. The Grand Maple Hotel Cafe wasn't somewhere they usually visited. It happened to be close to the parking garage where he had left his aging sedan after the school parking lot flooded. The cafe felt warm compared to the cold rain outside, and for one precious hour Elias forgot about unpaid bills waiting on the kitchen counter. Across town, 28-year-old Serena Holloway almost turned around before entering the hotel. She had spent the entire morning attending a job interview at a nearby architecture firm. It was her 8th interview in 7 months. The previous year had shattered everything she believed about herself. Before the accident, Serena had been one of the youngest project designers at a respected architectural company. She loved restoring historic buildings and dreamed of designing community spaces where families could gather. Her future seemed limitless until a distracted truck driver ignored a red light. When Serena regained consciousness 3 days later, doctors gently explained that her left leg couldn't be saved. Physical pain eventually faded. The emotional pain didn't. Friends visited less often. Her fiancé quietly ended their engagement 3 months after surgery, insisting she deserved someone who wasn't constantly traveling. His words sounded compassionate, but Serena understood the truth hidden underneath them. He no longer saw the confident woman he had planned to marry. He saw responsibility. Limitation. Burden. Losing her leg wasn't the hardest part. Feeling invisible afterward nearly destroyed her. Simple tasks became exhausting. Every staircase reminded her she wasn't who she used to be. Every interview ended with encouraging smiles followed by polite rejection emails. Employers admired her portfolio but worried whether construction sites would be appropriate for someone with mobility challenges. Eventually, Serena stopped believing people saw her talent before noticing her prosthetic. They saw the leg first. Everything else came second. That afternoon's interview had felt promising until the hiring manager mentioned they had decided to move in another direction. She smiled. Thanked them. Walked outside. Then cried alone in her car for nearly 20 minutes before deciding to stop for coffee. Now she stood inside the crowded cafe wondering if even finding a place to sit was too much to hope for. She looked around carefully. A businessman quickly spread his laptop across the empty chair beside him. An older couple avoided eye contact. A group of college students pretended not to notice her. Serena understood the silent language immediately. No one wanted the awkwardness. No one wanted responsibility. Then she noticed one remaining possibility. A father and young daughter occupied a table designed for 4. She hesitated. People often assumed single parents wanted privacy. Still. She slowly approached. Her heartbeat echoed louder than the conversations around her. She stopped beside the table and quietly asked, "Can I sit here?" The little girl looked up first. Then Elias. Without even glancing at the empty chairs, Elias smiled warmly as though she were an old friend arriving late. "Please," he said gently. "We've been hoping someone kind would join us." Serena blinked. She wasn't expecting that answer. Not because he offered the chair. Because of the way he offered it. There wasn't hesitation. There wasn't pity. There wasn't uncomfortable politeness. Only genuine welcome. She lowered herself carefully into the chair while thanking him. Marin grinned. "I like your bracelet," the little girl said, pointing toward the silver bracelet around Serena's wrist. Serena laughed softly. "It was my grandmother's. It's pretty." "Thank you." Within seconds the conversation flowed naturally. No awkward questions. No staring at her prosthetic. No uncomfortable silence. Just ordinary conversation. For the first time in months, Serena felt ordinary. Sometimes ordinary was the greatest gift imaginable. As rain tapped gently against the windows, Marin happily described her dream of becoming a wildlife veterinarian because, according to her, animals never laugh when someone looks different. The innocent sentence caught Serena completely off guard. She looked toward Elias. He smiled sadly. Children notice more than adults think. Serena nodded quietly. "I've learned that." Elias didn't ask about her injury. He didn't ask what happened. Instead he asked about architecture after noticing the blueprint tube beside her chair. Within minutes Serena found herself excitedly describing old brick buildings, public libraries, and the beauty of preserving history through design. She hadn't spoken about architecture with genuine excitement in almost a year. Elias listened with sincere curiosity instead of waiting for his turn to speak. People rarely realized how healing it felt simply to be heard. Across the cafe, several customers occasionally glanced toward their table. Some recognized Serena's crutches. Others noticed Marin laughing freely beside a stranger. None realized something extraordinary was quietly happening. For the first time since losing her leg, Serena forgot she had lost it. She remembered who she had been before tragedy introduced itself. When the waiter arrived carrying their drinks, Marin accidentally bumped the table. Hot chocolate spilled across the floor. Without hesitation Serena reached instinctively to help. One crutch slipped. She lost balance. The cafe gasped collectively as she began falling sideways. Before anyone else reacted, Elias gently steadied her without grabbing aggressively or making a dramatic scene. "You okay?" She nodded, embarrassed. "I'm sorry." "No need to apologize," Elias replied calmly. "Accidents happen." The waiter apologized repeatedly. Another employee rushed over with towels. Within seconds everything returned to normal. Except Serena couldn't stop thinking about something. Most people who helped her after the accident treated her like fragile glass. Elias hadn't. He simply treated her like another human being who almost slipped. Nothing more. Nothing less. That tiny difference meant everything. After fresh drinks arrived, conversation continued. Eventually Elias excused himself to help Marin wash chocolate from her sweater in the restroom. Serena remained alone for several minutes. At a nearby table sat an elderly woman who had quietly watched everything unfold. She leaned closer. I haven't seen kindness like that in years. Serena smiled politely. He's raising an amazing daughter. The elderly woman nodded. Children become who they watch. Those simple words lingered in Serena's heart long after the woman returned to her newspaper. When Elias and Maren came back, the rain had finally begun slowing. Outside, pale sunlight struggled through dark clouds. Elias checked his watch. We should probably get going before traffic gets worse. Serena suddenly felt disappointed. An hour earlier she had entered the cafe believing the world had no place left for her. Now she wasn't ready for this unexpected friendship to end. She gathered her crutches. Reached for her bag. Then quietly admitted something she hadn't planned to tell complete strangers. I almost didn't come inside today. Elias looked at her carefully. Why? She stared out the window before answering. Because every interview ends the same way. Every room reminds me that people notice my missing leg before anything else. Silence settled gently over the table. Not uncomfortable silence. Compassionate silence. Finally Elias spoke. My wife used to say something after difficult days. Serena waited. She believed scars are introductions, not definitions. Those words seemed to stop time itself. Scars are introductions, not definitions. Serena repeated them silently. No therapist had ever said anything so simple. Or so powerful. Tears quietly filled her eyes. Not because she felt pitied. Because someone had reminded her that her story wasn't over. She thanked him softly. They exchanged names. Promised to stay hopeful. And prepared to leave. Neither of them realized that the greatest chapter of their story had not even begun. The storm outside had ended. But destiny was only just beginning to arrive. The following Monday morning began like every other Monday in Elias Mercer's life. His alarm rang before sunrise. He packed Maren's lunch with peanut butter sandwiches and sliced apples, tied her shoelaces twice because she always managed to loosen them, and hurried through the morning routine that had become second nature after years of raising his daughter alone. Yet even while teaching history that day, his thoughts drifted back to the young woman from the hotel cafe. There had been something about Serena Holloway's quiet courage that stayed with him. It wasn't her prosthetic leg or the sadness in her eyes. It was the determination she carried beneath both. He wondered whether she had made it home safely. He wondered if she had another interview waiting somewhere. Mostly, he hoped she had believed his late wife's words, that scars were introductions, not definitions. Across town, Serena sat alone in her apartment staring at the business card Elias had slipped into her notebook before they parted. It simply listed his name, his school email, and a handwritten note beneath it. The world still needs people who build beautiful things. She had read those words dozens of times over the weekend. For months she had opened every rejection email expecting disappointment. On Monday afternoon another email arrived. Her heart sank before she even clicked it. She assumed it was another polite refusal. Instead, it read differently. The architecture firm thanked her for attending the interview and apologized that they could not offer her the original position. However, one of the senior partners believed her restoration portfolio deserved another opportunity. They invited her back for a meeting regarding a community redevelopment project that required creativity more than physical mobility. It wasn't a job. Not yet. But it was hope. For the first time in months, Serena smiled before opening her curtains. A week later she returned to the same hotel for the second meeting. It ended better than she had dared imagine. They didn't promise employment, but they asked her to prepare a presentation for the final round. Walking back through the lobby, she found herself glancing toward the cafe almost without thinking. The same corner table was occupied. Elias and Maren were there again. This time Maren noticed her first. Her entire face lit up as though an old friend had returned after years away. She jumped from her chair and waved excitedly. Serena laughed. For a few wonderful minutes they talked about school, architecture, and the improving weather. Maren proudly announced that she had earned a gold star for helping a new student who had been eating lunch alone. I remembered what Dad always says, she explained proudly. Serena smiled. What does he always say? Kindness is only real when nobody expects anything back. Serena looked toward Elias. So that's where she gets it. Elias shrugged with an embarrassed smile. I try. Over the next several weeks their unexpected meetings became a quiet tradition. Every Thursday after school, Elias and Maren stopped at the hotel cafe for hot chocolate before driving home. Whenever Serena's interviews or project meetings happened nearby, she joined them if she could. Sometimes they spent only 20 minutes together. Other days they talked until sunset. Slowly, something remarkable happened. Serena stopped measuring herself by everything she had lost. She started remembering everything she still had. She laughed more easily. She accepted invitations from old friends instead of making excuses. She began wearing dresses again without worrying whether strangers noticed the prosthetic. Most importantly, she stopped apologizing every time she needed a little extra time to climb stairs or cross a busy street. Confidence returned one quiet day at a time. Meanwhile, Maren had grown deeply attached to Serena. The little girl never treated her differently. To Maren, Serena wasn't the woman with one leg. She was simply Serena. The grown-up who drew beautiful buildings on napkins while explaining how libraries, parks, and schools could make neighborhoods happier. One afternoon Maren asked a question so innocent that it caught both adults completely off guard. If people can lose a leg, she said thoughtfully, can they lose hope too? Neither adult answered immediately. Finally Serena smiled softly. They can. Maren frowned. Can they get it back? Serena looked directly at Elias before answering. Sometimes, all it takes is someone offering them a chair. Those words lingered in the silence between them. Neither of them needed to explain what she meant. Months passed. Autumn painted the city in shades of gold and crimson. Then one Friday evening Serena received the phone call she had almost stopped believing would ever come. The architecture firm offered her the position. Not only had she been hired, but they wanted her to lead the restoration design for an abandoned neighborhood library that would become a community learning center for children. The first person she wanted to tell wasn't her parents. It wasn't an old coworker. It wasn't even herself. It was Elias. She hurried to the school just before dismissal. When he stepped outside carrying his worn leather satchel, she stood waiting beside her car with tears already forming in her eyes. Without saying a word she handed him the offer letter. He read it once. Then again. His face slowly broke into the proudest smile she had ever seen. I knew they would see what I saw. She shook her head. No. He looked confused. I almost didn't go back. He stared at her. I nearly deleted their email because I assumed it was another rejection. She swallowed hard. If you hadn't reminded me that my scars weren't my definition, I never would have opened it. For several seconds neither of them spoke. Some victories were simply too meaningful for words. Months later the restored community learning center officially opened. Families gathered. Children filled the reading rooms. City leaders praised the beautiful design. During the ceremony the mayor invited Serena to say a few words. She stood behind the podium, looking across hundreds of smiling faces. Then she noticed Elias and Maren standing quietly near the back. She smiled. I've been asked many times what inspired this building, she began. Most people assume it was years of studying architecture. She paused. The truth is, it began with one empty chair. The audience listened silently. About a year ago I walked into a crowded hotel cafe believing I no longer belonged anywhere. Every table was full. Every rejection I'd received convinced me that people only saw what I had lost. She took a slow breath. Then one father looked up, smiled, and welcomed me as though he'd been expecting me all along. Many people turned toward Elias. He looked embarrassed. Serena continued. He didn't ask what happened to my leg. He didn't offer pity. He simply treated me like another human being. Her voice trembled. That afternoon didn't change because someone solved my problems. It changed because someone reminded me I still mattered. The room became completely silent. Several people quietly wiped tears from their eyes. Serena stepped away from the podium and walked directly toward Elias. Before hundreds of strangers she hugged him. Then she knelt beside Maren. You know what your dad gave me? The little girl smiled. A chair. Serena laughed through tears. Much more than that. He gave me my courage back. The applause that followed seemed endless. Even the mayor found himself blinking away tears. A local newspaper published the story the following morning under the headline, "One empty chair changed 3 lives." The article spread quickly online. Readers weren't touched because it was dramatic. They were touched because it was believable. Everyone, at some point in life, has stood alone searching for a place where they belong. Months later, the hotel manager placed a small brass plaque on the corner table where everything had begun. It simply read, "Kindness always has room for one more." Visitors often asked why the table mattered. Employees smiled. Some stories were too beautiful to shorten. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support allows us to keep bringing true-to-heart stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Before we reach the ending, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, if you had been sitting in that cafe, would you have offered your seat to a stranger? Why or why not? Years later, Marin would grow into a compassionate young woman who volunteered at hospitals and rehabilitation centers. Whenever someone thanked her for her kindness, she always smiled and repeated the lesson her father had taught her. Kindness doesn't begin when life is easy. It begins the moment you notice someone else's invisible struggle. Serena never forgot that rainy afternoon in the hotel cafe. People often told her she had rebuilt an old library. But deep inside, she knew the truth. Before she rebuilt that building, someone had quietly rebuilt her. And all it had taken was one simple question. Can I sit here? And one unforgettable answer that reminded everyone in the room that the smallest acts of kindness often become the greatest turning points in someone else's life.